Greetings, everybody. I'm Erwin Cooperberg, Chair of the Londonderry Conservation Commission, and I'm very happy to welcome all of you with us this evening, and those of you who will be joining us later on YouTube. I'm very pleased to offer tonight our next speaker for our next event here. And our speaker tonight is Julia Pupko with the Vermont Center for Ecostudies. She's going to tell us everything we ever wanted to know about lady beetles. And they are a really fascinating insect. So I think you're going to enjoy the program tonight or whenever it is you're watching. So Julia, why don't you take it away and tell us more about yourself before you start.
All right, thank you for that. Okay, oh, there we go. All right, so my name is Julia Pupko, and I am the Eco-AmeriCorps, or one of the Eco-AmeriCorps members, serving at the Vermont Center for Ecostudies. I have a background in environmental sciences and a lot of different forest conservation things, from forest health monitoring with the Forest Ecosystem Monitoring Cooperative to starting a reforestation nonprofit with one of my friends. Tonight I will be giving a presentation on the lady beetles of Vermont, invasions, extirpations, and discoveries. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge that the Vermont Center for Ecostudies is located on Abenaki land. And I think that it is very important that we all do our piece to connect with the land respectfully and also uplift the voices of those whose land this is. So, what do you all think of when you think of a ladybug, also known as a lady beetle? Do you think of this small round insect that you see on the screen with red wing covers covered in black spots? So as I progress with this presentation, I would like you to all keep this specific ladybug in mind. This is the Asian ladybug and is actually one of the invasive species found in the state of Vermont. So this represents some of the other lady beetles that we have in the state of Vermont and in New England. And I want you to note the vast array of appearances that these lady beetles have, coming in different sizes, different shapes, different colors, some covered in hairs, others completely smooth. And you can also find lady beetles as eggs, often found attached to vegetation or to the crevices in bark. You can find them as larvae, often looking sort of like these tiny alligator-like critters. Or you can find them in their pupal phase. And one thing of interest at this point, the lady beetle name, like the lady beetle itself, has changed a lot over time. Originally, there apparently a bunch of European farmers at one point had a huge lady beetle or huge aphid infestation and prayed to the Virgin Mary for help. And a bunch of lady beetles showed up. So they named them Beetle of the Lady after the Virgin Mary in thanks. And then that term became lady beetle, which then became ladybug in America. However, entomologists don't like the term ladybug because what's a bug? A bug is a bug is anything. So we now have lady beetle as the term that I am using, but ladybug works just as well. And like their multiple appearances, lady beetles can be found in a very wide variety of habitats, and they can be found in basically every terrestrial habitat that we have in North America, from forests to grasslands to farmlands, even in wetlands and at the top of mountains. Across North America, we have around 475 different lady beetle species. Each of these species has adapted to prey upon certain small soft-bodied insects of choice. May that be aphids or mealybugs or scale insects. And also some of our native species have adapted to prey on introduced small soft-bodied insects as well, such as the twice-stabbed lady beetle and beech bark disease. Needless to say, all of our native species play a very important role as an ecological balance, controlling the levels or the numbers of these small soft-bodied insects so they do not become so numerous as to begin to damage the plants that they feed directly on, this being both wild vegetation and our agricultural crops. Sadly, across the United States and Canada, many of our native lady beetle species have been in decline. These declines are thought to be caused by a combination of different factors, including the introduction of non-native lady beetles, such as that Asian lady beetle you saw in the first slide, introduced diseases with those introduced beetles, land use change, and pesticide use. So of these factors, I really want you to focus on the introduction of non-native lady beetles and land use change, because these are the two factors that researchers have really been honing in on as the likely causes of decline, or most relevant causes of decline. So introduced lady beetles often grow faster than native species, and most lady beetle species are actually cannibalistic. So since those non-native species grow faster, they will be able to eat many more of our native lady beetle larvae than our native lady beetles are able to eat of them. Also, our native lady beetles seem to avoid eating the introduced larvae, whereas the introduced ones don't really care and just eat everyone. Additionally, these introduced species compete for habitat and for food, which further puts pressure on our native species. With land use change, there's been a trend towards urbanization and a fall of small farms, there we go, which has reduced land that has been very important for lady beetle habitat, since monocultures often have higher pest loads than a healthier and more diverse ecosystem. So to zoom in a little further, how are our lady beetles doing in Vermont? Lady beetles did not come on the radar of the Vermont Atlas of Life, which is a subgroup within the Vermont Center for Ecostudies, until 2018. In 2018, Vermont Atlas of Life researchers digitized a 43-year-old document, which you can see on the screen, which is a checklist of lady beetles found during and prior to a survey in 1976. As we digitized this document, we came to realize that many of our native species had not been seen since the completion of this checklist. And keeping in mind the fact that there have been national declines of these beetles, we were sort of like, uh-oh, this seems bad. So we began to collect as much data as we could, digitizing records from Cornell University's Lost Ladybug Project, the University of Vermont collection, Middlebury, Vermont Forest Parks and Recreation, and observations from the Vermont Atlas of Life on iNaturalist. Additionally, we have just completed, actually as of today, digitizing the Fairbanks Museum collection, which adds many more specimens to our historic documentation, which is very exciting. Anyway, at this point, we came to the end of data that we knew about and still had a bunch of species that had not been seen since the completion of this checklist. However, from digitizing all these records, we found that there are 35 native species and 7 introduced lady beetle species that have been recorded in the state of Vermont. And like I was saying, as of 2019, 13 of these species, which is around 30%, had not been seen since the completion of that record. Other species seem to be following those national trends of decline, so we wanted to know more. However, before I get into how we've been searching for answers and trying to compile a modern lady beetle fauna survey, I want to give you a visual representation of what this data looks like. You can see here, this is around when that 1976 survey was completed. One thing that's worth noting is this line does not represent the 42 species that are recorded in total in the state of Vermont, because many of our introduced species were not established in the state until after 1980. And while we have a lack of records, following that 1976 checklist, it does certainly look suspicious that we have this huge decline in the number of lady beetle species recorded right around the time when those non-native species were becoming established. So these apparent declines and general lack of records leads us to the Vermont Lady Beetle Atlas, which piloted in 2020. So our goal with the Vermont Lady Beetle Atlas is to survey the state of Vermont using a number of different measures to determine what lady beetles are still here, and also to determine whether those missing species have been extirpated or if they still exist in Vermont in low numbers. Additionally, we want to better understand the trends of those species that appear to be in decline. Are there just not enough surveys being done, or are they truly in decline? From here, we hope to inform conservation measures that may need to be taken, such as potentially reintroducing native lady beetle species that have been extirpated, and maybe trying to figure out some ways to combat the non-native species. So, to complete this statewide survey of lady beetles, we are calling on community volunteers from around the state, which hopefully includes some of you, or better yet, all of you, to help us search for lady beetles. This brings us to kind of what is the concept of community science and why are we using this? So true community science is actually a bottom-up approach of conservation where a group of community members determines a project and then reaches out for any help that they may need in implementing this project. In our case, we are asking for community volunteers to join us in our lady beetle search. And the reason why we are calling on community naturalists is because community naturalists are extremely good at contributing to science. So this here shows the number of lady beetles, not by species, just total number of lady beetles recorded over time. Excuse me. And you can see here, aside from this spike where that 1976 survey was completed, we have pretty much below 100 records for almost the entirety of lady beetle records in the state of Vermont, until you get the start of the Vermont Atlas of Life on iNaturalist, which just encourages people across the state to be using iNaturalist and uploading photos of organisms that they're encountering. I will get into that more in a second. And you can see that between 2019 and when we, jumped ahead of myself there, and 2020, when we piloted the Vermont Lady Beetle Atlas, there is a huge spike in records. So this shows how much community volunteers can contribute to a project such as this. Additionally, the Cornell Lost Ladybug Project, which in part is the basis for our current Vermont Lady Beetle Atlas, also used a community volunteer model, and those community volunteers rediscovered 2-spotted and 9-spotted lady beetle populations in the state of New York. Both species were previously thought to be extirpated or extinct in the state before community volunteers rediscovered them. So, like I was just saying, to collect all of our community volunteer contributions, we are asking people to use iNaturalist. And I'm going to super briefly jump into iNaturalist and show you all a couple of the cool features, because I think that it is a super awesome app for anyone to be using if you are interested in science. So let me figure out how to do this. New share, excellent. All right, there we are. So in iNaturalist, we have a few features that are worth noting. First, this app is entirely free and allows community members to connect with each other and allows community members to contribute to science by uploading their observations to this platform. Basically, how this works is you will upload a photo, such as this photo of the northern azure. And when you upload this, you can see right now it says needs ID, meaning that other community naturalists have not yet suggested an identification for this butterfly. Once somebody has come in and identified this butterfly, as long as they agree with the original identification, it will become research grade, at which point it will be pulled into other projects, such as the Vermont Atlas of Life, Data Explorer, and the other platforms such as GBIF, which is a global biodiversity platform. And that will then be part of a larger database that researchers can download with other uploaded documents to conduct research with. And basically, having other community naturalists confirm identification or comment a new identification if they disagree with the original identification gives you a layer of data validity and also enables people to learn together. So that is a really awesome feature of iNaturalist. So jumping back to the Explore page really quick, you can see here I have this filtered to the state of Vermont, and all of these red dots are actually, let me zoom in more and more. There we go. And now we're thinking. There we go. Are actually making up a bunch of these little multicolored teardrops, which each one of represents a different observation. You can see this one is research grade because more people have agreed that this is a hay-scented fern. You can also see that the original person uploading this was not sure what fern species this was, and the other naturalists have assisted in the identification. If you are interested in learning more about this species, or any species for that matter, you notice there's also a search bar up here. But in this case, I'll just click on hay-scented fern, and I come to the species profile page. From here, you can see that I have this interactive map on the right-hand side, which is all from iNaturalist data and is all based on the uploads of different observations by different users. You can also get more specific data here by filtering by place. For example, I could enter Vermont, and then this data will change to represent the observations uploaded within the state of Vermont. Additionally, you have a map which zooms into the area of interest or will zoom out if you get rid of your filter. Clear. Showing you the range of where the species has been uploaded. You have an about page linking to Wikipedia with other links because Wikipedia does not always have the most information on certain species. For example, some lady beetle pages are rather barren in Wikipedia, much to my chagrin. I guess I could always fill them out myself, but anyway. You also have a taxonomy page. Your status, if it is of conservation status anywhere, looking like it is endangered and critically imperiled in parts of its range, which is very alarming. And my favorite part of iNaturalist is the similar species tab. So this allows you to see other species that have been misidentified as the species or vice versa in the range that you have filtered to at the top. And this allows you to very easily identify how to, or start to learn how to tell, in this case, hay-scented fern apart from other similar looking species that other people have confused with hay-scented fern. So now there's many other features of iNaturalist, such as projects, which essentially allows you to curate a set of observations within iNaturalist, We have a project for the Vermont Lady Beetle Atlas, and also the Vermont Atlas of Life, which is all of Vermont's biodiversity kind of sucked into one project, which is pretty cool. But I'm now going to briefly show you how to upload in case you have not used iNaturalist before and are now interested. It is quite a great platform. So all you have to do is select Choose Files, navigate to some photos, and you can select multiple by holding Shift down on your keyboard, clicking the first photo one time, continuing to hold down Shift and either arrowing to the last photo or single clicking on the last photo while still holding down Shift. Then you simply click Open. Now you can see that all of these photos have populated in one place. Each photo is on its own plate, which is what I call these white things. However, pardon me, I have multiple photos of the exact same specimen, which is a good thing because having photos from different angles can help other community naturalists better identify what the organism is. That said, since all of these first 6 photos are of the same individual, I do not want to upload them as separate observations because then iNaturalist will think that I observed 6 of these lady beetles instead of 1. So what I want to do is have this first one selected, which it already is, hold down Shift and single click the last one. So they're all highlighted and click Combine at the top. So now they're all in one observation. And then I can also do that same thing for the second set of photos, which is of another lady beetle individual, holding down Shift, clicking all these photos and clicking Combine. So now I have 2 observations of the 2 individuals that I observed. From here, I can select species name. The artificial intelligence will give me an idea of what species it is. It is indeed a lady beetle, and it actually is indeed a Hyperaspis, but it is not a yellow-shouldered lady beetle. It is actually an Octavia lady beetle. There we go. And then for this one, it is an, oh, it got it right. It is, in fact, an Ursine spur-like lady beetle. Great. So I can click that. And another nice feature is I can click Select All at the top and edit both of these at once. For example, the date and location are the same. So I can simply click Date after selecting both and select the correct date, and then do the same for location, either entering coordinates, zooming in on the map, or searching for a location. Let's just say, for example, Burlington. And then I can unselect all and go about adding any notes or any other information that I may wish to hear. Last thing of note is that you can obscure your location if you, say, took photos in your backyard and don't want people to know the exact location of your house. That is possible. And then trusted users will still be able to see where the exact coordinates are, but the general public will not. So once you are done editing your observations, you simply click Submit, and you are all good to go. So I'm now going to jump back, into my presentation. There we go. Okay. Excellent. So super briefly, there is also a mobile app for iNaturalist, which is very convenient. It has many of the same features. You can see here, there's the Explore page, activity, the ability to add observations, a page for you, and some additional settings here. But it is not quite as easy to use or have as much information as the online version. So I highly suggest using the online version if possible. And to observe in this app, all you do is click on the camera icon at the bottom, and then you can either select the camera roll, the camera roll here, or take a photo. And that will allow you to then upload photos to the app. I suggest using camera roll because it only allows you to take one photo at a time, which if you're photographing something like a lady beetle, it will typically fly away before you get more than one photo in the app. And then you can add what you saw, any notes, and all of the other information that you get from the upload page on the website. And now when I click to the next page, as long as this works, you should see a moving image of red dots on the right-hand side. We'll see if it decides to function. Yes, it did. Wow. This has been very finicky for some of these presentations. Anyway, those red dots moving across the screen were the increase of research grade lady beetle iNaturalist observation over the years. And you can see now there's many more than there were at the beginning. So this connects iNaturalist back to our Vermont Lady Beetle Atlas. We have seen an increase, this is only in the year 2020, or from 2019 to 2020, I should say. We saw an increase of 234 iNaturalist users contributing lady beetle data for the first time. And we had a 54% increase in the number of research grade iNaturalist observations in lady beetles. And again, this is not from like one year to the next, but in the entire time of iNaturalist observation, which is from the early 2000s through the present, in 1 year, we had a 54% increase of research grade lady beetle observations, which is great. And now we only have 12 native lady beetle species missing. So one thing that I wanted to kind of talk about a little bit is in the state of Vermont, where we have the Vermont Lady Beetle Atlas operating and are encouraging people to use iNaturalist. We have over 1,700 research grade lady beetle observations with 27 different species and 433 observers. Again, this is just by the end of 2020. So this does not take into account any new people that we've had over the last couple of months with the start of the field season. Versus New Hampshire, where we have much lower numbers for all of the 3 categories. However, the non-native Asian lady beetle, remember that one, is a very high portion of all of the observations, which leads us to, this is the number of species of lady beetle recorded in the state of Vermont in 2020, and this is the number of each beetle recorded. And you can see that the Asian lady beetle by far blows every other species out of the water in terms of number recorded. And you can also see here the number of non-native lady beetles, which are represented by these orange hashed bars, versus the number of native lady beetles represented by these solid bars. And by number, I should say, the number of different species represented is a very even mix of native and non-native species in the top 6 lady beetles that were most frequently encountered in 2020. So this again kind of indicates that these non-native species, particularly ones like the Asian lady beetle, might really be not doing great things for our native lady beetle populations. To dig in a little bit deeper to our findings, our community volunteers have rediscovered, and this is actually 5 native species, not 4. One of the species we thought was discovered for the first time last year, but we actually found the only state record prior to that record in the Fairbanks collection today. And I forgot to change this presentation beforehand, so I'll note that one on the next slide. But anyway, this should be 5 species were rediscovered that were lost for over 40 years, including this species, the 4-spotted spur-leg lady beetle, the convergent lady beetle, undulate sigil lady beetle, and the hieroglyphic lady beetle. Additionally, so this was the other species, the Octavia lady beetle, that there's 1 prior state record in the Fairbanks collection. So it's actually rediscovered and not first discovered, but this is the 2nd state record from last year. But our community scientists have found 2 instead of 3 new lady beetle species that are native but had never been recorded in the state of Vermont before. These include the undoubtable lady beetle and the mountain lady beetle. Again, the Octavia lady beetle did actually have 1 prior recording. So for our next steps, what we are doing is having a combination of different methods to hopefully get the state as completely surveyed for lady beetles as possible. And we hope to increase community scientist participation through 3 different ways. The first is simply incidental encounters. What this means is that if you are out walking your dog or you are in your garden, you can simply, and you see a lady beetle, you can simply snap some photos of that lady beetle, upload them to iNaturalist, and that will be contributing to our Vermont Lady Beetle Atlas. If you have a little more time and are really interested in lady beetles, you can actively search for lady beetles, either visually searching, which is just looking for them. I suggest looking on they exist in all vegetation types and across all habitats. So look on tree trunks, look on herbaceous vegetation, look on shrubs. And it really also, they sometimes congregate on rocks. So that can be helpful too. Just kind of keep your eyes out for them. But if you notice a tree that either shows signs of aphid damage, or like beech trees show signs of beech bark disease with that white scale on the bark, those are really good trees to look for lady beetles on. And same thing with any, say, plant in your garden that has a lot of aphids, because lady beetles are very mobile and will move to where the food is. So you can usually find them on plants that have a high load of pests. You can also sweep net, which is just walking around with an insect net and whacking vegetation lightly with said net. Once you have gone a certain distance and collected, whatever you've managed to get in your net, you can slowly open the net and scoop insects that you find into any container that you have that's clear, so you can more easily take photos of them. Oftentimes, if you don't do that, they just fly away. Or you can use a beat sheet, which is basically you put a sheet on the ground and either hit or shake vegetation over the sheet so all the insects fall off onto the sheet. You have to be very quick with that one because they can just easily fly off the sheet. So that is active searching. You can do that basically anywhere. And the final way, which we really recommend people do, is to adopt a survey priority block for lady beetles. You can see here on the slide, there is a grid across the state of Vermont. This grid is from the U.S. Geological Survey topographic maps. There's 184 of those covering the state. We divided those into 6 roughly 3 by 3 mile blocks, and then selected a representative number from the biophysical regions represented by these red lines across the state, and are asking volunteers to adopt a block and then survey there as many times as they can over the course of the summer, hopefully using active searching methods. And we also ask that you survey at least 3 different habitat types across the block, and then just kind of, do that as much as you can. You can also see, here's Londonderry here. This is very convenient, and there's 3 priority blocks very close to you. So, there's that. One thing that is kind of important to note if you do decide to contribute to the Vermont Lady Beetle Atlas, or you are interested in using iNaturalist in general to start learning more about species that maybe you don't know a whole lot about, it is really important to think about how you are photographing either insects or other organisms to make sure they are identifiable. So in this case, you can see I have a photograph of the underside of the beetle, a photograph of the back and pronotum of the beetle, which is that middle section here, and a photo of the head here. And that really allows us to be able to distinguish, this is a 20-spotted lady beetle, from other similar species, since we can see all of the patterns that exist on the beetle. It is also really helpful to have a size reference, either by having, so in this case, I have a freckle on my finger here. So I know the distance from the freckle to the tip of my finger, and then later was able to compare the beetle to that distance. So I have a rough estimate of how long the beetle is, or you can bring a ruler in the field, either way. That helps distinguish some species that are absolutely identical except for their size. So that is just an important thing to keep in mind. Also, you really want to have accurate time, date, and location information, both for lady beetles and for anything else that you are putting up on iNaturalist, as you need that for it to become research grade. So to conclude tonight, I wanted to talk about a few lady beetle species that are of note found in the state of Vermont. And to begin, I'm going to start with the eye-spotted lady beetle. So the eye-spotted lady beetle is an arboreal or tree-dwelling species, which grows between 7.3 and 10 millimeters in length. Additionally, this species is found commonly on conifer trees and is a very important predator of the balsam twig aphid. One study found that the eye-spotted lady beetle very closely synchronizes its life cycle with that of the balsam twig aphid. And they had also compared the eye-spotted lady beetle and its life synchronization to the balsam twig aphid with that of the Asian lady beetle, and found that the Asian lady beetle did not synchronize its life cycle with the balsam twig aphid. Additionally, eye-spotted lady beetles very actively hunt balsam twig aphids, even being found to dig their heads into clumps of new growth at the end of twigs to extract aphids, and were found to reduce total egg populations of the balsam twig aphids by around 30%, completely destroying aphid colonies once they located them, again in comparison to the Asian lady beetle, which would only prey on these aphids opportunistically. So basically what this shows is how native species are very important for controlling native pest species and will react very quickly to the levels of those native pest species, therefore doing a much better job keeping those species under control than the non-native lady beetles do. So the next species of note is the convergent lady beetle. This one is a little bit smaller, growing between 4 and 7 millimeters, and is also a habitat generalist, meaning that it is found in basically any terrestrial ecosystem that we have. However, the convergent lady beetle is a very important predator in agricultural crops, preferentially utilizing wheat, sorghum, alfalfa, vegetables, and orchard crops. It is so good at controlling different pest species in agricultural crops that you can actually buy convergent lady beetles to release in your fields and therefore help to naturally control aphid levels. However, this species, even though it was once one of the most common native lady beetle species found across its range, is now strongly in decline. And we have only had a handful of records in the past couple of decades in the state of Vermont. So this is one of the species that we really want to encourage people to keep their eyes out for and, see if we can find out more, because it's very alarming that one that was once so common is now very rarely being found. There we go. And the final lady beetle that I would like to talk about is the marsh lady beetle. This species is even smaller than the convergent lady beetle, growing between 3 and 4 millimeters in length. As you can see, it is lightly elongate in shape and a light yellow color with black spots all over it. We know that it likes damp vegetation. This can be a full, classic wetland, what you think of when you think of a wetland, or it can be a very small wet meadow. I actually found one in a moist part of a meadow the other day. It's my first marsh lady beetle that I've ever found, and I was very excited. However, aside from liking wet habitats, I should also say this includes swampy forests as well. We don't really know much about this species, so it'd be really great if people find them to observe them and also take some notes of where they were found, or if you visually find them without, scooping them into a net, taking some notes about what they were doing, what they were eating, taking photos of that, that would be awesome because there isn't much known about this species. And with that, I conclude my presentation. Also, if anyone ends up watching this on YouTube who's not in Vermont, lady beetles are important everywhere and are definitely under research. So I hope that you will all keep your eyes out for lady beetles no matter where you are, and feel free to adopt a lady beetle priority block. I will drop this link in the chat. But thank you all for coming, and I look forward to questions.
Thank you, Julia. That was great.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Julia.
Yeah. Steve, you had a question.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Julia, about the convergent lady beetle. You say it's on the decline. Did we have a reason that's happening?
So that one, it kind of depends on what study you look at. That's one of the ones where they're like, land use change, introduced species. Yeah, we don't really know. So undetermined likely is one of those two factors. And it's kind of like, it's hard because a lot of lady beetles, even if they're like, arboreal species or meadow species, they will use different habitats. Like I said, they kind of just go where the food is. So
Yeah.
It seems to be a lot of the ones that are in decline are ones that like most frequently overlap with the introduced species, which, is also in areas where there's usually a little more human disturbance and usually like, more food, so agricultural crops. That said, you can be sweep netting at the top of a mountain and still find a ton of Asian lady beetles. So everyone's sort of like, well, I don't know.
Huh.
Yeah. More studies need to be done is the key at that point.
Here's something I've always questioned. We start out in the fall here in South Londonderry in my house with maybe 30, 40, 50 lady beetles stuck in the corners of our living room. By spring, maybe they're all gone. I don't know where they went. Maybe some got sucked up by the vacuum, but what are they and why are they there?
Yep, so those are likely Asian lady beetles. Not many native lady beetles will invade your house, and even fewer will be in that large of numbers. In that middle section of the lady beetle, the pronotum, look for kind of a distinctive M. So it's like a white pronotum with a black M on it. Some other species have a similar pattern, but the rest of the beetle doesn't look the same. They're also, what you think of when you think of a ladybug size, like kind of big for a bug. Anyway, Asian lady beetles, because they're an introduced species, typically like associating with human structures. They're sort of like pigeons, really liking cities, similar concept. And as a result, they like overwintering in people's houses instead of finding places in the natural environment, but they do also do that. So yes, that is why. And where they go, I'm assuming some probably die. Others probably just, find their way out of your house come spring and start reproducing.
What's their lifespan?
They're not eating. Are they eating over the winter, or what would they eat?
Well, that depends. So I actually haven't found anything on this yet, but I was kind of curious about that, because if they're in your house, the temperature is not going to get cold enough where they would enter dipause. So unless Asian lady beetles can still just enter their hibernation state and slow their metabolic rate, no matter what the temperature is, they do need to eat. As to what they're eating, that's a really great question. It must be, whatever they're finding around your house. Lady beetles do also, frequently consume pollen and nectar and things like that if aphid amounts are low. But, if they aren't hibernating and they are active, then if they're not eating, they will die. So I guess that also probably depends or affects where they go, how much food you have in your house for them if they're not hibernating.
We do have a lot of animals and critters in our home.
Yeah, that probably helps. What was that?
How about
What
your
is
house
there?
plants?
Go ahead, Jane.
House
Sorry.
plants.
House plants. Oh, yes, yes, definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
Also, I think, like everything else, especially if you put your house plants outside in the summer, there's probably an aphid or two running around on those. So that's probably helpful. And
Yeah.
if any are blooming or, are damaged and there's some sap leaking, that would be lady beetle food.
Okay, great, thank you.
Well, apropos to that, last year, because of the pandemic, we lost our office and were strictly working from home for several months. And then when things eased just a bit, we found a new office and moved into it in the fall. And it was an office that was quite empty for quite some time. And we had an infestation of ladybugs, lady beetles, around the windowsill. And that was in the fall. And I don't think they've come back this spring, and I don't know if if that has anything to do with the fact that the office is now occupied, but I'll be keeping my eye open for them this fall to see if they come back and who they are and what they're up to.
They very well may come back. They also may not. I'm assuming those that survived have moved outside with the warm weather. But we also, at my parents' house, we had a really bad infestation one year and then never, I think I maybe saw one lady beetle in our house after that ever. So, I think sometimes they come and move on. Also, to answer your earlier question about how long they live, depends on the species. Also depends on when they're born. Those that are some only have one generation per year. So they come out of hibernation. They usually overwinter in the leaf litter or under logs or in tree bark. So they emerge, they breed. Some species like the American five-spotted lady beetle actually migrate from where they overwinter. In that case, it's on high altitude mountain sites to agricultural fields and other, kind of fieldy ecosystems for the summer. But they breed and then breed and then migrate, or, breed and disperse, or disperse and then breed, whatever their species level thing is that they do. Then from there, they lay their eggs. Their little eggs will hatch and go through a couple different phases called instars, which are those little alligator type fellows. And then they pupate, and then an adult will emerge. And either that is the last adult of the season, or that adult will go on and have the same process again. But regardless, the last group of adults, when it starts getting cold out, will all aggregate together and either migrate back to a hibernation site, as the five-spotted lady beetles do, or we'll just find a comfortable spot either at the edge of a field or in the forest. Again, it depends on the species. And usually, not always, they'll stay in those aggregated groups to kind of keep warm over the winter. And they kind of all huddle together under the leaf litter. And some species will, live for a couple years. Others will only live, they hatch in the beginning of the season and then they're dead by midsummer. Yeah.
Okay.
So Julie, there's 12 missing lady beetles in Vermont as of now.
That is correct.
Just so I have my numbers right, there's 35 native, 7 introduced,
Correct.
meaning 42 species,
Yes.
and 12 of those 42 are missing.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy.
All
Hopefully
right.
we'll find them.
LCC will put our.
We'll see what we can do.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, Julia, thank you very much. That was great. I enjoyed that a lot.
I do too.
Yeah, and I think lots of folks, those of you on YouTube, enjoyed it too. So thank you, Julia, once again, and we appreciate your talk this evening. And for everybody else, bye-bye.
Thank you. Feel better, Julie.
Thank you. Have a good night. So I was kind of
Bye-bye.
talking through that.